Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Magistus Shaddoll deck profile. So I'm really excited for this deck because this is a really amazing combo deck to be able to go into some really amazing plays like El Shaddoll Construct, El Shaddoll Winda, and even being able to normal summon out your Magistus Veer to your side of the field to search a polymerization-like card in the form of Magistus Invocation, which is an amazing card for this particular deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name in the description every single video, getting a signed card in the mail, or even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Magistus of Veer. So she is amazing in this particular deck. Her only function in the entire deck is to be able to normal summon her out to your side of the field as one of your few normal summons that you're actually going to be using in this particular deck, and then search out your copy of your Magistus Invocation, which is a very important piece for this particular deck because it's basically polymerization for this particular build. Because when she's normally special summoned, you get to add a Magistus spell or trap from your deck to your hand, or you get to return one banished level 4 or lower spellcaster monster to your graveyard. That's the really 2 big effects that you're going to be using of this card all the time in this particular deck to be able to get a +1 essentially off the normal summon. We're then going to be playing 3 copies of Shaddoll Windy. Shaddoll Windy, since this is a very much a more pure build with just playing 3 of those cards in the particular deck for the Magistus engine, this card is going to be very pivotal as a 3 of in this particular build, because what she does is when she's flipped face up, you get to special summon a Shaddoll monster from your deck in face up or face down defense, but if she's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon a Shaddoll in face down defense position. Now something that's a quick upkeep thing, all of your Shaddoll effects, you can only activate either or of them once per turn, so that's very important to keep in mind. You can't get the flip effect and the sent to graveyard effect the same exact turn, so keep that in mind as we go through these particular Shaddoll monsters. We then play a single copy of Shaddoll Ariel. Shaddoll Ariel is really good too because you get to flip her face up, and then you get to banish a Shaddoll monster. They're targeted to banish Shaddoll monster and special summon in face up or face down defense. And if this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you get to target up to 3 cards in the graveyard and banish them, which is a very powerful effect, just to be able to target 3 cards in the graveyard and banish them. And she's really helpful with your copy of the Shaddoll Incarnation to be able to get back a Shaddoll monster onto your side of the field. Very, very important because this card can flip it back face up and banish a construct from your graveyard, and then she can revive the construct from banished, which is really cool. Or Winda, or any of the Shaddoll monsters that you particularly need. Usually it's going to be Construct though. We then play a single copy of Shaddoll Genius, the new Shaddoll monster. This card is really, really, really good. Now when you flip it face up, you get to target a Shaddoll monster you control. That face up monster is unaffected by monster effects this turn, except its own, and if this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you get to target 1 effect monster on the field, and neither player can activate that target's effects on the field for the rest of the turn, which is a really good effect just to be able to give you an additional negation. And basically you can fusion summon using this card from the deck with your Shaddoll fusion, so it gives you a disruption on your side of the field on your turn, which is pretty good. We play a single copy of Shaddoll Hollow. Shaddoll Hollow is an amazing card. I love this card in this particular deck because it lets you flip it face up and then target a monster your opponent controls and send 1 Shaddoll monster with the same attribute from your extra deck to the graveyard, and you banish that monster. And if this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can send any number of the top of the cards off the top of your deck equal to the number of different attributes on the field as possible, which is pretty good because if you have like 3 different attributes on your field, you can send 3 off the top of the deck, which can be pretty helpful for this particular build. We then play a single copy of Shaddoll Beast. When it's flipped face up, you draw 2 and discard 1, and if it's sent to the graveyard, you get to draw a card. We play a single copy of Shaddoll Dragon. If it's flipped face up, you get to target a card your opponent controls and return to the hand. And if it's sent to the graveyard, you get to add a spell or trap you get to pop a spell or trap on the field, which is pretty good. We then play 3 copies of Shaddoll Squamata. Squamata is really good. I like this card in this deck. It's basically Foolish Burial if it's sent to the graveyard, and if it's flip face up, you get to target a monster on the field and destroy it. This card is one of the best combo pieces in the deck because if you do use this card in combo with any of your other Shaddoll monsters, by sending them to the graveyard, their effects will go off as well, which is extremely powerful. We play a single copy of Shaddoll Hedgehog. Hedgehog is a searcher in the deck because if it's flip face up, you get to add a Shaddoll spell or trap from your deck to your hand, and if it's sent to the graveyard, you get to add a Shaddoll monster. Play a single copy of Falco as well. Falco is my personal favorite of all the Shaddoll monsters. because it has a really neat, unique effect that if it's flip face up, you get to target a shadow monster in the grave, except in the copy of itself, and you get to special summon it and face down defense. And if it's sent to the graveyard, you special summon this card back and face down defense, which is really amazing. I love that effect of just giving a monster that you know when you attack into it, as in my opponent, you're going to attack into this card, and I'm going to get a monster back from the graveyard, and it's going to replace itself, which is really nice. We then play 3 copies of Mathematician. Mathematician is going to be able to normal summon itself to your side of the field to be able to send any of your Shaddolls from your deck to the graveyard that are level 4 or lower. And then basically if you send Squamata, it doesn't care. You can send any of them from your deck to the graveyard to get a particular effect off, which is really powerful. 1 copy of Trick Clown, because Trick Clown is a great light target in this deck be able to use to be able to go into Construct, and it also has a really unique effect that can special summon itself back from the graveyard, but you take 1,000 points and it comes back as a 0/0. We play 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom is a really great hand trap in this deck because it just stops your opponent from all sorts of different shenanigans against you. 3 copies of Gamma, because Gamma is a great light target as well. And it's also a great card to negate hand traps against you, because if you open up with a Shaddoll Fusion and your opponent tries to Ash Blossom it because it sends from deck to graveyard, you then can use Gamma to negate, and then special summon a Gamma and a Driver to your side of the field, and then Secret Summon for Omega to rip an additional card out of your opponent's hand. So they basically go -2 while you get an Omega on your side of the field, which is great. We then play a single copy of the Driver, because Driver is basically here for the copy of Gamma to be able to special summon to your side of the field to then synchro into an Omega. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, it's going to be primarily fusion spells because it is a fusion deck. So we're going to open up with 3 copies of Super Polymerization. Super Polymerization is a key card in this deck because in any Shaddoll deck, you want to run Super Polymerization because it just outs so many different cards. If your opponent's playing light, dark, or in this particular case, in this deck, earth, you can out a lot of different decks with this card. And if you're playing any sort of mirror match, this card is pretty much game over if you draw into it, which is really amazing. We then played 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion. Shaddoll Fusion is ridiculous in this deck. It is great. It is awesome. It's my favorite fusion spell in the entire game, and it is so fun to play. It's the original card that lets you fusion summon from deck, because what it does is you get to fusion summon 1 Shaddoll Fusion monster from your X deck using monsters from your hand or your side of the field as fusion materials. And if your opponent controls a monster that was special summoned from the X deck, you can also use monsters from your deck as fusion material as well, which is great. And it's actually based on the original card that could let you fusion summon from deck, Gem Knight Fusion, just as a little side note for you guys. We then play 3 copies of El Shaddoll Fusion. El Shaddoll Fusion is basically a quick play spell that lets you fusion summon into any of your Shaddoll monsters, which is really cool. And then 2 copies of Magistus Invocation. So you are playing 11 fusion spells in this particular deck. It's not really too many in my opinion. The only thing that I kind of consider doing is dropping 1 El Shaddoll Fusion for a Call by the Grave just to stop my opponent's hand traps a little bit more, but it's totally up to you how you want to play it. But I would kind of consider maybe dropping an El Shaddoll Fusion for a copy of Call by the Grave. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing a single copy of Shaddoll Schism and a single copy of Shaddoll Incarnation. These cards are very pivotal for the deck. Shaddoll Incarnation is ridiculous. It basically is Miracle Fusion if you guys are unfamiliar with what that does. It lets you during your main phase, you get to fusion summon into any Shaddoll monster from your X deck by banishing the materials from your field and or graveyard, but it can't attack directly, which is not a big deal. And also, then you can send 1 monster from your opponent's side of the field that is the same attribute as the monster you just fusion summoned from their side of the field to the graveyard, which is really, really good. We then play the Incarnation. Incarnation is also really good because it combos with Aerial very well, because it has the ability that you can target a Shaddoll monster in your graveyard and special summon it in face up or face down defense. You manage this card and any other Shaddoll monster from the graveyard to then target 1 face-down monster your opponent controls, or 1 face-down monster you control and flip it face up, or target 1 face-up monster you control and flip it face down, which is really good for the deck, because basically you summon Aerial to your side of the field, and if you have Construct in your graveyard, you can then have this in the graveyard as well, to then banish this and the copy of Incarnation to the graveyard, which will flip your copy of Aerial face up, and then basically you'll get to special summon back your Construct and face up defense, which is pretty good because then you can go into a link play, or you can just leave the Construct on the field, which is also very nice. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 3 of the single best card in the extra deck, and that is 3 copies of Shaddoll Construct. I love this card. It is my favorite of all the Shaddolls. And what she does is she must be fusion summoned, and if this card is special summoned, then you can send 1 Shaddoll card from your deck to the graveyard. And at the start of the damage step, if this card battles a special summon monster, destroy that monster. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, then you can target 1 Shaddoll spell or trap in your graveyard and add it to your hand, which is a very powerful effect. Just to be able to search cards and out of the deck, to be able to send them to the graveyard, grab back a Shaddoll spell or trap from your graveyard to your hand, and be able to destroy a monster by battle. If it does battle that monster and special summon, you just immediately destroy by card effect, which is amazing. We then play Double Winda. Double Winda is probably the best way to go about this, because what it does is it can't be destroyed by opponent's card effects, and neither player can special summon more than once per turn. So it basically locks you both into, you and your opponent, into only special summoning once per turn, which is really, really, really good. And if it's sent to the graveyard, you can target Shaddoll spell or trap in the graveyard and add it to your hand. We then play a single copy of a Pokelone. A Pokelone takes a 2 Shaddoll monsters with a different attribute, which we have plenty of those in this particular deck. It can't be destroyed by battle, and if this card is special summon, you can target a face-up card on the field and negate its effects. Or if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add a Shaddoll card from your deck or graveyard to your hand, which is also a very powerful effect. Play a single copy of Shikanaga. Shikanaga is ridiculously good, especially in this build that I'm playing Mathematician in, is why I just could not play this card. I love playing this card in this particular deck. It's so fun to play, and it's just such a good effect, because it has the ability that it must be special summon, and then during either player's turn, when a special summon monster that activates its effect while you have a Shaddoll in your hand, you discard the Shaddoll, or you send the Shaddoll to the graveyard, and then once you send the Shaddoll to the graveyard, you get to negate that monster's effect, which is really good, and it actually activates your Shaddoll monster's effect, which is really amazing. And if it's sent to the graveyard, then you get to add a Shaddoll spell or trap from your graveyard to your hand. We're then playing a single copy of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, being the last fusion monster in this particular deck. The Starving Venom Fusion Dragon is basically a super poly target. So for the links, we're playing a single copy of Access Code, because Access Code gives us a lot of different pops against the opponent. This can be Borreload if you're trying to make it a little bit more budget, but it can be Borreload or Boral Sword or Appaloosa if you want to. 1 copy of Unicorn, because it spins stuff. Since it's a fusion deck, we're playing Cross Sheep. Cross Sheep is really good in the deck too, because if you fusion summon, then you get to target 1 level 4 or lower monster in the graveyard and special summon it, which can help you climb into an Access Code talker really easily. Prepare to play Verte Anaconda, because you can super poly with it, or use your copies of Shaddoll Fusion from the deck, which is really good. Gravity Controller, because if you fusion summon into your construct into your extra monster zone, you can link the construct away, and when you basically, what the big combo that I usually do with this card is I will summon Construct into my extra monster zone, and then I will send from my deck to the graveyard Schism, and then once I send the Schism to the graveyard, I will link the Construct away for Gravity Controller to put it on my extra monster zone, and then I get to add the Schism back from graveyard to hand, and then set it on my side of the field, and then basically I'm already set up for an additional play, and this gives me a bounce on an opponent's monster, which is really good. 1 copy of Artemis, because it's a great light monster, because it helps you get into your Shaddoll monsters a little bit easier, because you can link away Veer for this card, and then it also basically gives you a light target, which is really good. And then I play a single copy of Cyframe Lord Omega, because I play Gamma Driver in this deck. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really, really, really fun deck to play. If you guys have never played a Magistus version of this deck, I highly recommend that you do, because it is probably the best way, in my opinion, to learn the basic concepts of the way that Shaddolls play, because you're basically going heart and soul into basically fusion summoning over and over and over again, and you're basically relying very heavily on your fusion monsters, and it's a very weird, fun build with very simplistic kind of rules of what you're trying to do. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can come part of notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.